Welcome. Tonight on Another Thing About Tartan, I am so pleased to welcome Mark Reilly, CEO and President at the Washington Tattoo, a military man and quoted as one of the most effective military music connectors in the world. With works showcased at the White House, London's Royal Albert Hall, Edinburgh Castle, the Vatican, and a myriad of other iconic international locations. So thank you for joining us, Mark.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Anna. Thank you so much for having me.
So, I'm not sure where to begin with such an illustrious career. So, maybe we should hear all about who Mark is, who the real Mark is, what shaped your childhood, what brought you to pursue a military career and to this day.
No, absolutely. So first off, I never in a million years thought I would ever join the military. So to look back on a military career is a little strange to think about it. But originally grew up in New York. My parents are from New York City. They're from the Bronx, and I grew up about an hour and a half north of New York City in an area around Poughkeepsie. So in the Hudson Valley, and got involved with fifing and drumming. So we did a lot of firemen's parades, a lot of local carnivals, things of that nature as a kid, and really fell in love with rudimental drumming. So rudimental drumming is kind of the old traditional kind of Yankee Doodle. People think of marching bands, things of that nature. But I was about 6.5, almost 7 years old when I first started marching in my first fife and drum corps. And I was very lucky to meet a mentor and a teacher of mine at a young age named Nick Antanasio. And he was a kind of an old Italian guy from Brooklyn originally. And he taught me how to play drums, but he really taught me a lot more about life. And so as things kind of had it, became pretty proficient at playing drums and was able to go to college for a music scholarship and got a degree in music education for my undergrad. And of course, student loans came around. And so when student loans came around, there was this amazing offer by the US Army to say, hey, we're going to pay off your student loans if you give us some service with the US Army. So basically, 20 years ago, I started with the US Army, Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps, and I'm just kind of wrapping up a career with that now.
Wow. And are you a family musical as well then, or is it just you?
So strangely enough, my parents don't really play music all that much. They kind of dabbled a little bit, but strangely, my favorite grandfather as a child taught me how to go fishing, how to throw a baseball, and really what ended up taking place is he died when I was very young. And so I knew that he was a U.S. Army Ranger in the Pacific. And so really after that, I didn't know too much about him. But very long story short, I take lessons with Nick Antanasio. I go to college. I graduate from college. And my mother comes to me after I graduated from college and hands me a pair of drumsticks. I said, oh, wow, these must be from Nick. And she goes, no, these are actually from my father. And I went, get out of here. No way that. So Grandpa Donahue was the drummer. And she hands me a photograph of him in a kind of cadet style uniform with a snare drum slung across his chest. And he was apparently a snare drummer in an American Legion drum and bugle corps in the 1930s in the Bronx, New York. So there definitely were musicians in the family, but my parents weren't the direct connection.
Wow. Yeah, interesting. So you were with the United States Army Old Guard, the Fife and Drum Corps, and the Army's official ceremonial unit. So were these planned career moves then, or is it more opportunities that came up along the way, or how did that pan out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was very lucky when I came in. There was a lot of turnover at the Old Guard. So the unit that the Old Guard is, it's the United States Army 3rd Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard. It's official escort to the president, and it's the Army's official ceremonial unit. So we do all the White House arrivals, all of the inaugurations, things of that nature. But when I joined, a lot of retirements were happening. So the Fife and Drum Corps, you can come do that job in Washington your full career. So you can spend an entire career in Washington playing music with the Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. And so 2003, when I joined, there were a lot of retirements happening. And so a lot of positions for music writing, music arranging also came open to me as well. And I met a man named Eric Juilliard. And Eric Juilliard now is the producer of the Basel Tattoo in Switzerland, and has been great friends with Melville Jameson, the former producer of the Edinburgh Tattoo. But Eric is really more known for being the founder of what's called the Top Secret Drum Corps. And so the Top Secret Drum Corps has been to Edinburgh many, many times. But in 2003, they really had come into their own as a big act at the Edinburgh Tattoo. And then the next following year and a half, a lot of their original members were doing other things and, going on to different parts of their careers. So I was introduced to the Top Secret Drum Corps in 2005 and was a playing member of the Top Secret Drum Corps when the Edinburgh Tattoo went to Sydney, Australia. And so kind of as I started my old guard career, I was introduced to the military tattoo scene and the Top Secret Drum Corps, and kind of this almost brotherhood of not just military musicians, but kind of marching music, pipes and drums, fifing and drumming, drill teams, things of that nature. And so the Old Guard, of course, being the ceremonial unit in Washington for the Army, has a prestige and a name to it that I was able to access people at a very high level for a lot of these other organizations. So it was such a blessing to be a part of the Old Guard at that time when all of those relationships could be built.
Yeah, interesting. And so you mentioned there about being escort to the president as part of that role. So how you chosen to do that then, and is it as exciting as it sounds, or not really?
I will say, being in the military, there's always a yin and a yang, and you have the glamorous side and the not so glamorous side.
Yeah.
So the title Escort to the President actually comes from the escort division of the inauguration parade. So what happens is, on the west side of the US Capitol, the president is sworn in, puts a hand on the Bible, raises the right hand, swears, in as president. Then there's usually a lunch period that takes place. And then on the east side of the Capitol, the honor guard is there to actually escort the president as his first official duty to leave the Capitol, follow in behind the escort, and then go to the White House, which is what our job and our title is. So it's very, very glamorous when you see it on TV, on CNN, C-SPAN, all those things. But the rehearsals for that and that morning are pretty brutal. So when you're out there at 3, 4 in the morning, you're going through Secret Service sweeps, the dogs are going through, you're lining up, making sure. This past time around I think we had been COVID tested 6 or 7 times in 2 days. So it was definitely a lot of logistical moving pieces back and forth prior to. But at the end of the day, you look back on that and you look at the videos and you see what kind of impact you have on the American people and the world when you talk about this peaceful transition of power. And some years are more peaceful than others, and you see the very best and the very worst of human beings in Washington. And so that's been something to be, I think, really aware of, and just see how they act. We are a military unit, which definitely has roots and can be thought of as a very conservative idea. But as a musician and being a music maker inside of the military, you're on the other side of that, where you're kind of in the much more liberal arts side of the house. So we really do have both feet in very different types of ideology. And so being able to be in Washington that long and being able to navigate it is, I think, a great skill. And you have to be very diplomatic with how you do try to pull the very best out of people that may be thinking in very different terms than each other.
Yeah. A whole other world from Scotland, certainly. So music has obviously shaped your life and your career. So what is it about music that you love so much? What's special?
That's a great question. I would say it probably comes at different points and in different ways. As a young musician, you're very kind of ego focused about you being a good player and you performing well and the feeling and sense of gratitude after you have performed well. But I think after you've performed and you've done it at a high level for a long time, you start to recognize that music itself is not really the end game. It's a tool. It's a tool to connect with other people. And when you start to see other people enjoying the music that you create, all of a sudden that's a game changer. And then I think the next stage after that, you start to recognize that there are young ones that are watching you, kids, lots of kids watching what you do, and the chance to inspire youth and have them want to become something of what you're doing. And when you're in tune with that and you recognize that, that becomes addictive. And I think that to me is probably where I am now with music, where when we talk about it at the Old Guard, we've had a philosophy of kind of these three pillars. One is performance excellence, where you have to shoot for performance excellence. But the second part of it is we're a part of the oldest active infantry regiment in the U.S. As in the U.S. country, the nation of the United States. And so you're part of a great story. You're a part of this heritage and this history that now you're this little part of over the last 200 years. And after you've recognized that and you kind of come to grips with that, you recognize that the next piece is that you're not there forever. And you have to give that to the next people that are going to fill in your shoes. So when you think about it, first pillar is performance excellence. The second one is about history and heritage and the story behind it. And then the third one is the sense of community that you need to then give to other people to bring them in as well.
Mm-hmm. Wow, yeah, that really resonates with me, that inspiring the young people. I think, yeah, it is, as you say, addictive, but just such a rewarding thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the Washington tattoo then. What's inspired the Washington tattoo, and how does that, obviously here in Scotland, the Edinburgh tattoo is a massive thing. Well, it's an international thing, isn't it? So how did the two go together, and how have they influenced each other?
Sure, absolutely. For all of your viewers and listeners, I 100% blame Brigadier Sir Melville Jameson. It is 100% his fault. So this was a magical time in 2005. There was not an American act at the Edinburgh Tattoo in Sydney that year. And so there were a handful of us, of Americans that were there experiencing it, playing with other groups. But for me, it was the first time I had gotten to see patriotism not done in the American style. And to me, as a young 20-something, was a very powerful moment. And hearing Waltzing Matilda, hearing God Save the Queen, and all of these things with, the Union Jack flying and the Australian national flag flying, it was very impactful. And so over the years, Sir Mel and I become very good friends of, where he was just a great mentor for me. And every time I would see him, he'd always come and say hello. He'd always ask me how things were in Washington, but he'd always kind of elbowed me in the ribs a little bit and say, why does this not exist in Washington? Why does this not exist in Washington? And the answer is easy. And the answer is that every service, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Coast Guard, the Marines, they all have their own version of it in Washington. And when I explained that to Sir Mel, he said, that's fantastic, but that doesn't leave opportunities open for international counterparts and relations and, different styles of outreach. And so after a handful of years, I started to do a lot of homework on why certain events either succeeded or failed in Washington. And when you come down to it, when it comes to the budget for the arts, it's almost always the lowest hanging fruit, and it's the first thing to get cut in so many places. And I understand why. I maybe don't agree with it, but I think I understand why in schools, in the Department of Defense, music is not the number one priority. It is a priority, but it's not number one. And so when budgets get tight, one of the easiest things to cut is music and the arts. And so when we started looking at models, do we do a for-profit? Do we do a non-profit? Do we do charity? How do we decide we want to go with this? I spent a lot of time talking with Eric Juilliard, talking with Mel Jameson, Runa Vick from the Norwegian military tattoo, and also folks from really the tattoo scene holistically. Scott Jackson down at the Virginia Tattoo. And when you think about it being a charity and think about what you can do for veterans, what you can do for veteran families, first responders families, and now honestly with COVID, if we look at it from a mental health lens, the ability to help so many people with the power of this tool that we talked about earlier, this tool of music. People sing in the shower, they sing driving down the road there, and you don't need to be a Pavarotti or a Yo-Yo Ma or one of those amazing performers. You can play a harmonica, you can strum 2 chords on a guitar, you can sing very poorly in the shower, but something happens to you in the act of making music and creating something artistic. And so when we look at mental health of specifically our veterans, but I mean really everybody, music can be really the healer of unseen wounds. And right now it's almost the perfect time to be able to launch something of this magnitude that can have such a generous impact on the mental health of so many people, or for so many people.
Yeah, that is a fantastic mantra, isn't it? Yes, I like that. I can't sing and I'm not musical, I can't play anything. So I'm in awe of anyone who is musical, I really am. I still sing in the shower though, so as long as nobody can hear. So what does it mean then to have the tattoo in Washington to you personally, but also to the world as a whole? Because it's obviously a very international thing as well.
No, that's a fantastic question, and honestly, it's an evolving answer. Every time that we end up meeting a new partner that can offer an angle of something that we may have not thought of, we just start to kind of think, wow, it doesn't really have a ceiling. It can do so many things, but as a business, to really execute, you have to remain focused, and that I think has been the biggest challenge. Is everyone says, well, how do you eat an elephant? You have to do it one bite at a time, and you have to be really good at that bite. And so for me, when it comes to the city of Washington and what Washington stands for today across the world, I've heard it called many things. I've heard it called, it's this, the center of the most powerful nation in the world. I've heard it's the new version of Rome. And it can mean a lot. It can mean a lot of negative things for a lot of people. So I think Washington itself has, I would say it's more than a duality. It's got a lot of different hats and a lot of different faces. But when you think about what the idea of Washington can be for hope and what it can be for humanity, it has so much power to resonate with really anyone from around the world if the right tools are being used at the right time. And I think that to me is really one of the key pieces that a lot of people like to say, you got to have the right people on the bus. Well, that's fantastic, but they need to be in the right seats on the bus with the right equipment and tools on the bus to make that bus be the most effective and efficient bus it can be. And so from me personally, this has been a venture of love, and it's a personal and honestly a professional mission, because to go back to the story of my grandfather for a moment, who was the drummer in World War II, or the drummer prior to World War II, but served in World War II, the reason why he ended up passing away was he had unseen wounds. And he left his duffel bag sitting at Penn Station in New York when he came back from the Pacific. And pretty close after he turned 65, he stepped in front of a truck and committed suicide. Mm-hmm. And so it was one of those moments where when I learned that as a young adult, I knew that there was something for me that I had to do. And again, I don't ever push religion down people's throats, but I do believe that we're all put here on this earth for a purpose. And if we follow the breadcrumbs that are provided for us, we start to realize that other things exist out there. And for me, when I started thinking about the mental health of our veterans, the power of Washington, what it could mean for hope, what it could do for other people, and the story of my grandfather, I start to think, if the Washington tattoo could have been around and we are able to provide enrichment for veterans like him or others, and maybe even find ways of plugging them into the production, which is honestly what we've been doing during COVID, is finding our friends that are military musicians, former military officers, logistics folks, operations folks, And having them just be a part of this thing that means so much more than us as individuals, it creates this sense of purpose where people are just magnetized to it. And in Washington, D.C., and having people think of hope and humanity and music and arts wrapped up with the concept of service through the military, I just think right now is the perfect time for that message to resonate, not just here in the US, but around the world.
Yeah, wow. And so your first event then, your annual gala, is going to take place on the 4th of April. It's not long to go. You'll be in the final preparations. And we can't wait to join you. We're very honoured to be there. So how long have you been planning this then? How long has this been in your mind, and who's coming along? What kind of formats the evening going to take?
No, absolutely. And thank you so much for joining us. We cannot wait to have you there. It's going to be so
I've
exciting.
never been to Washington. It'd be my first trip to Washington, so I'm very excited.
No, it's amazing. The week that you'll be arriving is Tartan Week. And so we have the National Capital Tartan Committee that's here in Washington, and they have events. But of course, we have events up in New York City with Tartan Week as well. And so the gala being on Monday evening, first you have everyone saying, really, on a Monday? But if you look at it, it actually starts off a series of a Washington, D.C. event on Tuesday, a Washington and New York event on Wednesday, a New York event Thursday, another New York event Friday, and then the parade on Saturday. So, I mean, really, it's fulfilling the entire week of Tartan Week. And so we thought about it, and we put together an idea for this gala, and we started looking at, where we would host it, the reasons why we would host it at a very specific location. And so we chose the winery at Bull Run, which actually looks over the battlefield of Bull Run. And if you're familiar with the American Civil War, Bull Run is what the North or the Union Army called it. If you were from the South or from the Confederate Army, you called it Manassas, the first and second battles of Manassas. But they were very interesting battles with its connection to the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard. So the first Battle of Bull Run, the Union Army was in retreat and almost was destroyed. But the saving grace of the Union Army was the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard, who protected the rear as the Union Army escaped. So we went, how cool would this be to have this event with several of the Washington Tattoo staff are former members of the Old Guard, and we have a lot of folks that are, fans of the Old Guard and what we've done over the years, so they are a part of it as well. And so the location really started coming together for this gala. But as we started thinking about the gala and the components of the gala, we started thinking about the special guests, getting our embassy contacts and friends, would they be available to be there? And luckily, so many of them were gracious, saying, yes, we'd love to support you. We'd love to bring some of our team there. And honestly, the most beautiful thing happened with our relationship with the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo and the CEO, Major General Buster Howes, OBE, when he decided I really would love to, figure out how we could work together and partner together. And so Jason Barrett who's the Chief Operations Officer, and Buster will also be at the event, and they'll be presenting as well on their story on how they come out of COVID and what it means to bring the tattoo back to Edinburgh, which is huge, which we're really excited about. And then this creative partnership with the White House Historical Association. And I had to, of course, wear this the White House tartan tie, as well as I think it was made by this incredible place called the Scotland Shop.
We're honored to be on that label.
So no, it's been a really great, I think, synergy between all of these organizations, and to have you there, folks. Stuart McLaurin from the White House Historical Association will be there to speak. Buster Howes from Edinburgh will be there to speak, and a great partner that we have in AFMA, who is a mutual aid, mutual funds and insurance company that supports veterans and military members, are going to be there. So it's been fantastic to bring sponsors and folks that are interested in our story and our mission here to the winery. And honestly, I do have to just say we picked up a great transportation partner with Reston Limo, which is a woman-owned business, which is another piece we talk about, the diversity piece and what we need to do to elevate the story of, you know, female leaders and diverse leaders of color. That's something that we have to bring the tradition and the modern innovation together with, and that's what we're really trying to do with Washington Tattoo.
Fantastic. I can't wait. And can listeners join virtually? Is it something that can be seen from around the world or not yet?
So we will have a video that will come out afterwards.
Okay.
We are trying that part of the elephant biting, chewing that we're doing. Right out of COVID, we put on a workshop. I would say out of COVID, a year ago, and everyone thought we were coming out, but then Delta came in and we had to kind of close it all back down again. We did a live workshop in Williamsburg, and we had between 50 and 65 people at this workshop who'd come out in masks. But what happened was we ended up doing a live component with a digital component. And at that time, just really trying to get all of the logistics right out of the gate. We said, look, let's get the live thing right first. Yeah. And then as we build out, we'll do the online offering.
Yeah, fantastic. Good. So apart from the drumming and the musical link up, what other links do you have to Scotland? Have you got Scottish heritage? Are there stories in there that we've not heard?
There are. So I have to admit, I am an American mutt. So I am
purebred.
Yeah. So it's funny because you know, I've done a lot of research, and most people I've spoken to that I say, look, if you think that any part of your family is 100% Irish, there's going to be Scot in there somewhere. Yeah. You just go back far enough, you'll find it. So that was very true on my father's side. My father's side, his parents both came right off the boat from Ireland, early 1900s, and my grandfather's side was from County Cork, and my grandmother's side was a little bit further north. But as we started to look into that, and we went further, we got into Cavan, we started getting into Northern Ireland, and then we started to talk about some Scots-Irish ancestry. So with some McGowans and some McKeons, and we started looking down that road. And my mother's side is actually, we do believe, has more of some of the Scottish side. So my mother is more of a mutt than you could possibly imagine. She's a lot of Irish, but a lot of English, a lot of Scots-Irish, but also Hispanic and French. So we have a lot of Puerto Rican in our family, and we have a chunk of Puerto Rican family that lived in Puerto Rico and came to New York. There's a lot of interesting stories from the McIan side of the house, and looking up tartans and looking up colors of the McGowan side. And I think there's this story of, you know, McGowan meaning maybe in Gaelic, the son of Smith or blacksmith, something kind of like.
That's where the Smith came from, yeah.
So I didn't know that actually until you and I started talking, and I said, wow, what tartan suit do I have to buy for this? And so I started looking at colors, and I said, that Smith one looks pretty good. I like that.
Yeah, it's a very nice tartan. Good choice. Good choice.
Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. So, given all your international travels over the years, I'm presuming you've been to Scotland, and if so, have you got any favourite places, any good stories from your trips?
So I need to do a longer deep dive in Scotland proper, which is planned for this summer. But I think I have to tell you, the first time I was stepping in front of Edinburgh Castle, I didn't know what to think. It was, you see it on TV, you see photographs out of it online, and when you step in front of the actual castle and you look at the statues and you see, you know, the flags flying, and you just look behind you and you look at the Royal Mile. I mean, as a kid, I saw it on PBS as a child, the Edinburgh Tattoo. And so I think I just stood there in awe for maybe, it seemed like an eternity. It was probably about 45 seconds to a minute and a half. But this feeling just came over me that was so powerful about what had happened there, what had happened on that spot where the battles, the peace treaties, the disagreements, but then to have that location as the spot where all of this cultural diplomacy happens is it's incredible. And so we got to go eat in the mess, and we got to eat in the castle, which I thought was incredible, and have a dram in the officers' mess, and it was magical. But definitely looking forward to coming this summer for the Tattoo and Pipe Band World Championships. So I'm very, very excited about that.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we'll have to show you around and bring you down to our end of the country. So we're just below Edinburgh in the borders. So lots of teach from the side. Yeah. So we've mentioned and we've maybe touched on your favourite tartan. I was going to ask you if you had a favourite. So you obviously love your White House Historical Association tartan, which is a very beautiful one. So you mentioned Smith then. You have a preference for ancient. Have you got any other favourites?
So I think I have to look at this now because at some point we have to think about a Washington tattoo tartan. I think that'll be in the mix.
Yeah.
So I really have, I do, when I think about, a good friend of mine was talking about the Buchanan tie and the Buchanan tartan. He said it's very loud.
Oh, yeah, yeah, it is.
I have a big love for that one. But for me, honestly, I have fallen in love with the Smith tartan. I really have. I think there's a classiness to it where it's a subdued color. And I think when you think about modern and ancient, I'm still looking at really what the type of attire would be to wear the more appropriate one. Because for a kilt, I do love the modern look for a kilt. That's fantastic. But I think there's something about the tradition of an ancient look with a pipe band coming down the street that just, there's a classic look to it that I love.
You'll have to have one of each then. Or we are making a suit just now for a gentleman that combines both an ancient and a modern of his tartan. So.
Oh, that's interesting. I'd love to see it.
It is, yeah. I'll have to send you some pictures when it's complete. It'll be quite a lot. And we've done it before, but it is, yeah. I think you need to be feeling brave to be wearing it. But, fantastic. So what next then, to finish off? What next for the Washington Tattoo? I know you've got lots of ambitions, so, and some of them might be top secret, but have you got some things you can share with us?
Sure. So I think really, honestly, one of the big things is our partnership with the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo. And I'll let them share, what that looks like. I think it's more proper for them to be the ones to share what their plans are. But there's really some exciting conversations happening with the two organizations moving forward into the future. In the short term, in 2022, we have several live events and also a digital event. So we found out that doing a virtual tattoo during COVID is a fantastic way to create a pipeline of musicians that are willing to work with us, get them exposure in Washington and also with our viewers. And so as we do a virtual event and a virtual production, with this past one, we had the Royal Australian Navy Band. We've had the Dutch Marines Steel Band. We've had the Oscott Highland Dancers. We've had the Commandant's Own Marine Drum and Bugle Corps. We will do that again in 2022, probably around December, maybe not January of 2023 for that virtual event. But our live events, what we're starting to build out right now is a quarterly workshop that's focused on what we're building in our teaching artists. And we're going to do a certification that you can be a certified Washington Tattoo teaching artist. And what that can do is help build your resume. It can connect you with other like musicians around the country. And we've had a wonderful director of development. Her name is Carrie Kilbane. And she's been the one really spearheading this initiative. And really after COVID, the music industry has just been pulverized by, the live events not being around. What are we doing for our students, getting them out into the real world. And so the Washington Tattoo is leaning forward with that. And we want to help with education and being able to provide platforms for not just musicians, but also educators. So in our Washington Tattoo workshops, we'll bring people in, but we're also going to be pairing them up with military musicians or military veteran musicians that are going to be with the Washington Tattoo Teaching Artist Program, and have them being effective communicators on what the military service can do for you, providing structure and discipline, and also a network for people. So we have our next workshop in May in Williamsburg, Virginia. But then we're also doing a live workshop / build as a combined effort with the Association of the United States Army in October. So in October, their annual event is the AUSA annual meeting, and there are military members from all over the world come into Washington. They're a part of the Army 10 Miler, and we are working on putting together a little mini tattoo for their president's reception. So we're looking really excited, forward to and excited about that. But the last thing, and I'll leave all the listeners with this, is that our big targeted event hovers around the 250th anniversary of the United States. That is in 2026. So there is a 250th commission that is organizing the events. Our goal is to be one of the official semi-quincentennial events, which is the 250th anniversary of the United States, starting in 2025, middle grounding it in 2026, and then finishing up, I believe, in early 2027. And so that's our big milestone, is the 250th anniversary of the States.
That'll be quite an event. I look forward to that too. Well, thank you, Mark. I feel like I've learned so much, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. So interesting and so inspiring of them. I'm in awe of everything you're doing, and I can't wait to see it live on the 4th. Can't
Awesome.
wait for that day. So.
Anna, thank you so much for your time, and it's an honor to work with you and your team, your staff. You're so professional, and honestly, you're so accommodating. The hospitality side from everything you've done for us is world class. So thank you so much.
No, thank you.